Okay, this is the critical lap. This is the critical lap. Confirm.
Let me alone. I know what to do.
Welcome back to the Critical Lap podcast. This is Spanish Grand Prix weekend. I'm one of your hosts, Ruben, and I'm here with Daniel. How you doing, Daniel?
Doing great, Ruben. How are you, Ben?
I'm completely hyped, man. That was a fantastic Grand Prix, and it wasn't one that had all the excitement at the beginning and then left you with a slow ending. It was one that had all the excitement at the beginning, middle, and then lots more at the end. So, man, I'm hyped.
Really had to work for this one. This is the one you had to watch all the way until the end. I mean, not that you wouldn't anyway, not that either of us don't.
Right.
But
yeah,
this one had me thinking, Barcelona. And then
Barcelona. Daniel,
Barcelona.
you don't pronounce the C, it's a TH if you're doing Spanish. Spanish.
Right. This is a common misconception. People think that Spaniards lisp all the S sounds, but they don't. They don't. There's a distinguishment between the S's and then the C's that sound like S's, the soft C's, and the Z's. So
I just had to correct you while I could, because what the listeners might not know is that Daniel is fluent in Spanish, and specifically Spain Spanish. So that was my one chance to correct his Barcelona. But I think it's
true.
I think
this
probably you realize, as someone as attuned to you as you are to society, that it comes across as pretentious if you call it Barcelona.
Oh man, when the American people, when the full-blown Americans tell me about Barcelona,
when they've been to Barcelona.
When they've been to
went to Barcelona on vacation.
The wine in Barcelona.
It's just beautiful.
The Serrano ham, the jamon. It's Barcelona. Say Barcelona.
Yep.
We're speaking English,
and they don't want you to be there. To be totally honest,
do not want you there. They
do not want you
there. I don't know if I've ever told you this story, Rube, but I've been to see the race in Barcelona.
Nice.
The Formula One race.
The Formula One
and
the Grand Prix.
The Formula One race. And I would say that the animosity towards tourists wasn't quite that bad yet. This was 2017.
Okay. They didn't truly hate us yet.
They didn't truly hate you yet as a tourist.
It was
in 2019, it was dripping with disdain for any non-native.
Yeah. And I'm guessing when we all got out of COVID and used all that money we saved up to go back to Spain, it really set it off.
Yeah. I won't go back in the touristy season. I won't go back to Barcelona. It's just, I can't.
Even though you can hide it with your perfect Spanish and
Sure. But the story here is that, well, and for anybody who doesn't know, Barcelona, actually a lot of the neighborhoods have sort of been ruined, because if you're anywhere near the port, it's just Airbnb around every corner, and cruise ships come in and dock and just dump all variety of tourists into the city.
Some good,
and these are people that just, some good, some bad, everything in between. And these are people that just kind of roam the city. Some knew the
boat was stopping there. Some didn't know the boat was stopping there.
Some people try to say Barcelona. Some people don't. But yeah, so you just got swarms of people that just inundate the city. And obviously it's a big economic opportunity for people. But when these people are in port for a couple of days and they don't want to stay on the boat, they just, it's full hotels, Airbnbs everywhere. You're taking your kids to school and there's people snapping pictures around the corner and just not a great quality of life for people who are from this place, from this area. And
I get that.
Anyway,
I mean, that makes sense.
So
when we eventually go back, you're going to have to teach me what to do to not look like a tourist in Barcelona.
There was a market difference in 2017. This is before, and again, I'm sure now it's wild, but in 2017, I would get a certain vibe all the way up until a day that I noticed people looked at me differently, treated me differently, spoke to me differently, is when I was wearing my Formula One kit.
Okay.
On a day that I was wearing the hat or the shirt or whatever that distinguished me as a Formula One fan.
So you're saying there's a Formula One community that transcends hatred of tourists?
I think what happens is that the locals in Barcelona are like, okay, this is the type of tourism that we know and love.
Yes, we accept
this is
you.
the economic opportunity that we want the city to have. We don't just want random people who are just in and out.
Yep.
The Formula One has a certain legacy there. I mean, motorsport in general, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, MotoGP way predates popularity in Spain
Right.
before over Formula One. Thanks to Fernando Alonso, Formula One is obviously huge now.
Sure.
But
And
there are
Carlos
three.
Sainz.
Well, sure, but
He didn't
Fernando
win the
started it, right?
championship yet. Yeah.
Right. Um, there are 3 MotoGP races in Spain, maybe more than that. So it's already like
Okay.
people understand, people get it.
Yeah.
So when you're there for a legitimate reason, they're like, yes, this is it.
Okay.
But
As
when
long
you're
as
just So
tourist or not, we all
my
say meow and
yeah. So when we go,
yeah.
we will be a little bit more kit forward in
Yeah.
our day to day outfitting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wear our F1 gear. Say stuff like vamos really loud.
Yep.
Probably.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well,
Yep. Yeah.
I mean,
Something like that.
I want to go, especially after that race. I do feel like that set the bar pretty high. It was a good race. Like you said, I think sometimes you get all the action right up front. And then sometimes the only real reason to stick around all the way through the end of it is just to hear the commentators get bored and start rattling off fun stories that they only bring out when it's a slow race. But this one, I think if you had to like take all the action and put it on a scale, you'd have to put the center of that scale around lap 64, 65, right when they 66, right back when they went back to racing. So yeah.
This is a 66 lap race, and most of the noteworthy action happened lap 64 on.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Man, good race. So we're getting into that today. We'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about Barcelona. I'm sticking with it. We'll recap the Grand Prix a little bit. We got a little bit of F1 news to get to. And I want to wrap up with a little bit of, Daniel, what we'll call, what are the rules to this game we're playing? Maybe just a recap from some of the action today. So, hey, let's jump in. We'll do a little recap here of some news first. So the big news kind of going into the weekend was Stroll's hand. Doctors or experts, professionals, medical advice was that he should not race in the Grand Prix, even though he finished qualifying and he qualified all right on Saturday, but he sat out the race.
As expected for Aston. Yeah.
As expected. Yeah. I mean, in 2025, Lance Stroll qualifying well for Aston is actually not too far off the mark. There were a lot of questions about why didn't they sub in one of their very good secondary drivers. They've got Drogovic and Van Dorn. Neither can race because the regulations do require that you name them as the backup driver prior to qualifying. Q1. So because Stroll qualified, we only had 19 drivers on the grid today. So apparently, and again, we're not really ambulance chasers here, so maybe that's not the right turn here, but Stroll had some frustrating moments on Saturday. It sounds like he had some frustration in the garage. I think those may be overblown. It was not related to the hand, so this is not a punch the wall situation. It sounds like it's maybe a reoccurrence of the injury he got in 2023.
So not related to the hand, he's not frustrated because the team did acknowledge that he's upset, or he was upset in the paddock.
Sorry.
You're saying that they're acknowledging that he wasn't upset?
His frustration did not lead to him injuring his
Didn't
hand.
cause the re-injury of the hand.
Right.
Yeah. No, well, see, the original injury of the hand was from a cycling accident pre-testing 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And he's since had like pins in his wrist or, so holding some of the bones together or fusing the bones or whatever.
Yeah.
So he's been driving through this injury for 2 years now.
Right.
So it's more than 2 years now.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like it's kind of that flaring back up. He was back in the car really fast in 2023 when he heard it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's the intention again. Canada's 2 weeks away. I don't know how you undergo surgery and recover enough to not be like bleeding in the cockpit.
Right.
2 weeks from now.
But it's his home Grand Prix, so it does feel like he's gonna make every effort. And they're doing magical. I mean, the first recovery was crazy. Carlos Sainz bounced back into the car after an appendix. Had his appendix removed. I don't think
but you don't drive the car with your
surgeries we're
appendix,
getting.
You do drive the car with your For those of you who don't know, you don't drive the car with your appendix.
Yeah. But no, but I do feel like these guys are getting different kinds of surgeries than you and I got. You know, if I broke my wrist tomorrow, they'd say like, "Well, doesn't look like you're going to be typing for the next 2 months or something like that." These guys are like, "I think we can turn them around in 13 days. Should be all right." That's a really fast turn. Was he already in surgery like this afternoon during the race?
Yeah, I mean, for all we know, I think the last sighting of him was Saturday, right?
Okay. Maybe they flew him out. I can't imagine they could find a doctor anywhere in Spain that was interested in working on his hands Sunday afternoon. They call a doctor up. He's like, I'm watching the Grand Prix. They're like, no,
He's
it's
like-
for Lance
He's like,
Stroll's
this
hand.
is Barcelona. What are you talking about?
This is Barcelona. What are you, a tourist just off the boat here?
Right.
Yeah, that was Lance Stroll out for the weekend. A lot of that. I mean, I feel like I'll admit, I get frustrated right now. We've taken plenty of jokes at Lance Stroll's expense. This year in particular, he does look a little less excited to be racing than you would hope a driver would be. But I got to say, it's pretty frustrating to see the commentary that's just like, oh, hopefully he's out for the year, or hopefully like he's completely done. I know there's a lot of frustration here, but at the moment, I think he's got 14 out of 16 of Aston Martin's points. He's having a pretty good season, and I hate to kind of draw attention to that, but he's not a terrible driver.
And for those of you astute listeners out there who haven't seen the race by chance, yes, Alonso finally scored points.
Man, I just spoiled that. Sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. Stick around. There's still more. There's still more big reveals. Yeah. Alonso getting his points in. I'm trying to think if there's anything else news wise this week. I mean, all I saw was just the Monaco fallout, or what I like to call, 50 million people trying to decide if there's a career for them in track design, as they all drew pictures over the top of water half the time in Monaco about how we can fix this racetrack, with some red lines.
They just
Google
went
Map
straight
image.
Mario Kart with Rainbow Road, just like,
Yeah.
oh, here we go.
What if we built a bridge right over the top of this? The Monaco fallout has been funny. I mean, I do think a lot of it is deserved. It was a rough race. They tried to manipulate, as much as they could, the rules to make it fun. And, we
Listen,
made
I'm
some
not complaining
jokes, but
about the rules. I've seen a lot of negative press about the rules. I think the mandatory two-stop made for a really interesting race to watch. Now,
yeah,
you might argue, is it true to the motorsport spirit or whatever? I don't know, and I don't care, because whatever was happening before was
right.
just very. I mean, again, I said it last week. What the drivers are doing around that circuit in those
Narrow
confined
streets.
spaces,
Yeah.
and pushing, and
Yeah.
staying
It's more
essentially inches from each other.
it's more like
And then-
train racing.
Yeah, they have to push around every corner, through every lap, regardless of blue flags or not, regardless of where they stand in the race, because you never know what can happen. You never
Right,
know what red
right.
flag might do or might come, and how that might change. But it doesn't make for great watching.
No.
You kind of get lulled into just getting used to that, and then the race ends basically the way it started.
Right.
And I get it. So I think that what they did with the mandatory two stop, for those of us who can follow strategy and understand the different implications at the different positions or
it was
whatever,
at
I
least-
thought it was great.
Yeah, I mean, it was at least an attempt at making a change, because we've joked, not really. I mean, we're kind of serious about the fact that it would be nice to see them thrown into a go-kart, or thrown into, I don't care at this point, some modified minis. Put them in something more
mhm.
interesting. I saw a really fun suggestion that they should put them on the grid in some type of a modified or slowed down car, or maybe just the Formula 2 cars with all the other Formula 2 drivers, and just make it a big chaotic show, right? It's not like maybe no points, maybe you just drive for fun. And honestly, that would make it fun, take the points out of it. Because I think that's why Toto Wolff totally lost it, because in his mind, they qualified badly, and then it's just basically sit back and wait for everyone else to get their points before you get to move on. And listen, I mean, no one's going to give Toto Wolff too much sympathy given his success, but everyone else wants their points, but
Crocodile tears, Toto. Crocodile tears.
crocodile tears. We don't believe you. Anyway, the only suggestions I've seen that would be good seems like you would have to modify the cars. You'd have to modify the cars or put other limiters on them in some way, which probably wouldn't be
Yeah.
a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
And we've been saying this. We've said it more than once, more than one way. And I think we talked about gamifying a little bit more, gamifying that race particularly a little bit more. I feel like
yeah,
that
I
if
like
I'm
the
not
idea of
remembering it
sprinklers
correctly.
down at the swimming pool. Just slow down or spin out, man. It's your call,
Yep.
right?
But
Some flashing lights.
Formula E has a lot of different things that you could do. Friend of the pod actually hit me up this week and was telling me how just outside the box you could get with Monaco.
Yeah,
Don't change anything necessarily. Just add some different rules, some different things that you could do, driver to driver. Who knows?
right.
So
Okay.
again, I think that the forced two stop strategy from the FIA was a way that gamified it.
It
So
did. It did. And
yeah.
I'm going to go on the record as well. All the back and forth about it, all the complaining, all the suggestions and recommendations and jokes. A lot of what I saw as well was, this is kind of a side note, but a lot of what I saw as well was Williams and Albon like apologizing, and some of it was fun. It was like a picture of Alex Albon and George Russell with Albon like paying for his dinner, and then
Yeah.
and then James Vowles being like, "Oh, I'm sorry" to Toto, and like that he had texted him and said he was sorry. Can I just go on record as like maybe a relative newcomer? Maybe I'm just a dumb American here trying to figure out how it works, but stop apologizing to Mercedes Williams for having a decent strategy for a really difficult race with rules that were kind of manipulated. Like, you did exactly
Right.
what you were supposed to do.
Or else we're going to start wondering whether or not Toto is threatening to pull the power units for next year.
Right. Right. Like, I'm sorry. Sorry. Did we just hear from like the team that hasn't won a championship since like the 90s apologize to the team that won like 8 in a row or something like that 4 or 5 years ago because they did the exact same strategy Mercedes and everyone else was doing? Sorry, that one kind of rubbed me the wrong way. They had all these pictures and it was supposed to be like, look at the sportsmanship. He texted him and said sorry. Like, I would text him and be like, like we are in front. Good luck. I don't know. That frustrated me. Anyway, tell us how you really feel, right?
So as you were saying, fallout from Monaco. Monaco being the
Fallout from
spectacle that it
Monaco.
is,
Yeah.
having all of the hype going in, controversy coming out with what the forced two stop did to the race, and George Russell's response, Mercedes versus Williams, which again, like you're saying, not rivals.
Right.
Allegedly, Russell and Albon are really, really tight bros off the grid, not necessarily on.
Yeah.
Which is why we saw that dinner afterwards and all that kind of thing. But then you have to follow Monaco. A race has to follow Monaco, and it was Barcelona this year. So, here we are.
Here we are. Well, all right, let's get to it then. It's not like Albon had a fantastic day today. Jumping into the Spanish Grand Prix, the Spanish Grand Prix. Let's jump into it. Highlights. Daniel,
I think it's called the Gran Premio de España.
Gran Premio
The Grand Prix
de
of
España.
Spain. Yeah,
Nice.
Not this. Yeah, that's how they say it. Not the Spanish Grand Prix, but the Grand Prix of Spain.
Nice. And I just want, for the record, I hope you feel confident in your Spanish on this. Like, you should not feel judged in any way. I'm impressed every time you bring some Spanish out. So
I have no qualms.
Call it what it is. All right, let's jump in. And I think to Daniel, in the spirit of trying to spotlight and highlight the behaviors and the racing we want to see, I'd like to talk about the winners and the people who drove really well today. So let's jump in with Piastri. Piastri, spoiler alert, first place, takes another win, his 5th Grand Prix win of his career, and just looked unstoppable. I mean, his qualifying was strong, basically all the way through, had no real issues. Felt like Norris was kind of chasing a lot. And then his race, just solid from start to finish.
Well, agreed, 100%. And while we're on the topic of Piastri, quick reaction for you, Ruben.
Yeah.
Is Piastri bored with winning yet?
I don't know that we would ever know. I don't it's impossible to tell when he's bored or excited.
I mean, so the reason I ask, right? Like when you say what you're saying is he dominated more or less.
yeah. Yeah.
Qualified in front,
Mm,
had the best start of any car by a
mhm,
mile. Had the
mhm,
best start by a mile. Never struggled the rest of the race.
mhm.
Strategy was on point.
Right.
Comes out of the car, sort of unceremoniously, just does his interview. Oh yeah. Terry Crews at the interview at the end of the race asked him, what do you expect your performance to be? And he was like, I mean, obviously, I think he was like, I mean, you could probably guess, pretty good.
Pretty good. Oh, to be
Yeah.
fair though, I'm not sure Terry Crews knew what his name was, but that's a whole separate topic.
Yeah. I just hope that I can get my life on track enough to look that good at that age that Terry Crews is.
Yeah, I don't
'Cause
even know what
that
his
man
age
is fit.
is, but I'm gonna guess
That
it's
man is
older than I
fit.
think.
Yeah. He's probably biologically younger than me, even though he
42.
might be double my age.
No, I'm not stupid. I'm gonna say 47, but that's probably under,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Anyway, I feel like these days with
I
like
think he's older than
stars
47,
for
but
sure.
he's biologically younger than me
Well,
for sure.
Brad Pitt's supposed to be playing like, whatever he's supposed to be, 43, 45. And he's like 60. Well, Terry Crews, I mean, maybe that's a whole separate topic, but while we're on it, separate topic. Terry Crews, I'm not sure he knew. At one point, he said Lando and Charles and the whole McLaren crew. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
don't know if anybody else suffers as I do from secondhand embarrassment, where when you see someone giving an interview and they mess up, you just get really uncomfortable on their behalf. I spent a
Right.
lot of Terry Crews interview time kind of worried for him and just
Is that
feeling
so would that then be like the opposite of Schadenfreude?
okay, I'm gonna admit something. I don't know what Schadenfreude means. I keep seeing people post it.
It's a crazy German word, but it just basically means you take pleasure in the demise or in the displeasure of
Okay.
others.
Yeah, I
Just
think it would be.
misfortune,
I think it would be.
misfortune, bad things, anything. So Schadenfreude, I wish there was a cool, quick
Yeah,
way to say what you're talking about, which is basically what embarrassment,
yeah.
secondhand embarrassment, secondhand
I think it's 9
nervousness.
Schadenfreuden. Schad I've
Yeah,
messed that up. I clearly speak very, very good German. All I know is that
real good.
the legendary producer, Chris P, loves things like The Office. And there are moments in the TV series Office where I have to sort of like, I'll kind of do this thing where I stand up and I almost leave the room. I sort of back up and I'm like, and then I come back over and sit down when the really awkward moment's over. I had that moment with Terry Crews. Terry Crews a couple times. I don't think he was positive who the other McLaren driver was when he interviewed Piastri. I don't think he said anything. I have to go back and look at the interview. He would just kind of be like, thanks. And then when Lando came up, he was like, my man. And Lando Norris got like a high five. It's like, wow, okay, you clearly really like Lando Norris. Yeah. And then I don't think
Well,
he could
hey,
think of
you
his
know what?
name.
Formula One people, if either of us are ever invited to do anything related,
Yeah.
anything that Terry Crews got to do today,
Yeah.
we will do our homework.
We know
Don't
all the
worry.
names.
We know all the names.
All of them. I know where they drive and everything. Can't pronounce all of them, but yeah, I know all of them. Jack Doohan over there with Alpine.
Okay.
So it was a great interview. I did get a little nervous for old Terry Piastri. I mean, he's just doing Piastri things at this point. I do think it's really interesting. We're probably going to be watching documentaries in 5 years from now if we keep going the way we're going, or special interviews and podcasts with people interviewing and saying, we really had to sit Piastri down after his second, you know, championship or something and say, hey, I think you're missing opportunities because you're doing it so quietly. People kind of forget
Hmm.
who you are. So when the race is over, it's like, oh, who's your favorite driver? It's never Piastri. It's always like, oh, Norris had a great drive. Verstappen had a great drive or whatever. Piastri just quietly winning. It feels the same where they have to at some point decide how to balance their persona. And right now he has no balance in his persona. I love it, but he has no balance in his persona. It's just, yep, I won. Good race. I'm not going to do the Australian accent, but good race. Felt like it was a good one.
Well, we can't forget Kimi Räikkönen, right?
Yeah.
Kimi Räikkönen just so dry,
Yep.
so dry, and so like dry to the point that you just look forward to every single time that the mic got put in his
Right.
face
Right.
because you were like, oh, it's gonna be gold. It's gonna his just awkward pause, one word response,
Yeah.
or just refusal to like
What a
doesn't even take
stupid
his sunglasses
question.
off. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. You know, he is just so not notorious, legendary for not caring at all
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
anything anybody else thought and still just putting in a heck of a performance every single
Yeah.
time. Obviously, he wasn't always in the best car, but
Right. Right. Right.
he just and I think Oscar is almost he's kind of doing the same thing, but it's not funny yet, or it's not there's not anything to it
Right. Well,
like
is there
there is
okay,
for
so
Kimmy.
here's your quick reaction then. Is there a danger then, Daniel, though, that attitude of Piastri, we find it refreshing now, but is there a danger that fans are going to feel like, "Hey, you're not giving me enough here. You're not reacting, you're not upset, you're not angry, you're not." Is that potentially going to damage his brand?
I think that if he starts to underperform somehow, whether it's the car or whether he passes his prime or whatever it might be, and he seems like he doesn't care, I think fans will then kind of be like, okay, like, who do you think you are, Kimi Räikkönen or something, you know?
Right.
But at the same time, if I'm Oscar, I think that I respect what he's doing because I think he's like kind of saying through this attitude or this, I don't know, I don't want to say shtick, this behavior
Right.
that he's like, I'm here to race. That's what I want to do. I don't care about all the other stuff. I'm not trying to be your friend. I'm not trying to be your hero. I want to drive. And I
Sure.
want to drive so much that I'm this good at driving. This is what my focus is all the time. You don't have to worry about where my focus is or
Yeah.
if I'm in it for the right reason. And you never know. He might pull a Nico Rosberg one day where he goes out on
He
top,
just
you
says,
know?
"I'm done." Yeah.
Exactly, and I hope not. I really hope not
But
because
we wouldn't
I
see it
think he
coming
would
if he
be
was going to.
squandering a lot of yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think he'd be squandering a lot of future success. But you never know, right? You never know what these guys are thinking, and it is a grind. And I'm sure that
Sure.
if you love driving, if you love motorsport or whatever, doing several seasons of Formula One can probably turn it into something that you don't
A bit of a
enjoy
grind.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just here's the thing. I think you're right, and I think from an analytical perspective, or from a pure I just love the sport, I love racing perspective, Piastri's like a dream. He's a great driver, no drama, pretty disciplined. Just kind of knowing people or like thinking about the things that people like, they tend to like characters, right? Everybody loved Danny Ricardo. Why? He
oh
won a
yeah.
few races, like he was a nice, but he was hilarious, right?
He was fun to watch. He
He
was
was
fun to
fun to
hear.
watch.
He was yeah.
Yeah. And people tend to like characters for better or worse. They either like them and then they defend their bad behavior, or they hate them and they criticize everything they do, even the stuff that's not bad behavior. Piastri's kind of right down the middle in a way it makes it really difficult to hate him, but kind of difficult to really love the guy because he doesn't really say anything funny. He never really reacts. He doesn't really shout at anybody. So it kind of leads to a point where you're, good for you. But I think I'd like to see how this plays out over the next couple of seasons. I think it could potentially start damaging his brand in the sense that he will be no one's favorite, but he won't be hated by anybody, which is a good and bad thing. But either
True.
way, unstoppable, great race. Uh, I will say I do kind of want to move on to Verstappen. At least we'll call it Verstappen's first 64 laps, where he was great, had a fantastic race. I found myself wondering, like, how many stops can he do? Like,
Yeah.
that's too
Yeah.
many. Wait, maybe not. He's doing fine. Uh, the math didn't seem to work out. It was like he went into a little pit stop portal where he just always was third place, even though he was stopping more often than everyone.
He was in a pit stop portal 100%. And after his second pit stop, he was 5 seconds behind Norris and I'm like, uh
How?
you basically have gotten free pit stops this whole time. Norris and Piastri still have to pit again and you're going to pit right on schedule with them the third time
Right.
onto whatever tire you want and it's going to work out really well. Ruben, I thought he had it.
I thought he had it.
I was like, this strategy is going to be the winning strategy. How, how did we not see this, or how did any other team not like the idea of a 3-stop strategy?
That's what I was blown away by is, as I watch the races, I'll take a few notes or kind of note things so I can go back and watch them again or go back and get the details if I missed it. And I wrote down like 3 different notes throughout the race about Red Bull strategy. Like at one point, I just thought like, what are they doing? That's way too early. Are they completely giving up and they're just going to settle for like 7th? And then, they nailed it. They had this like planned out to the last moment. That held all the way up until the safety car. And then when they put him on the hards, I was like, oh, I think they had a brilliant strategy that just ran out of page on this 4th stop. Like they never expected it to happen, which is unusual for Red Bull. Somebody asked. Go ahead.
I think they were in a really tight spot when that safety car came. They were like, "Oh no, this is the one thing that we didn't want to happen to us," because basically the advantage just completely went to all the other teams.
Right.
They were forced to keep up with on some version of a fresh tire, because if not, yeah, they could have stayed out and not pitted under the safety car, but then they would just be waiting until, was it going to be 5 more laps, 10 more laps? Who knows?
Right.
Not quite 10, right? They couldn't have cleaned it up that
It's like
fast,
6
but
or 8 or something. But
Verstappen would have essentially been in a position to hold off fresh tires in what we know to be slightly better cars for some amount of laps, and that could have just proven to be disastrous. He might have gotten position by not pitting and changing tires. So he had to put on some set of fresh tires, period.
But usually teams have like a safety car plan. And I guess that's the dice they rolled. Somebody called him up and said, is there any chance we win this? And they said, yeah, with a weird 3-stop. Like, okay.
The only way they could have solved for that risk would have been to put a hard tire on way earlier. To start on a hard tire, which didn't really work for their 3-stop plan. To switch to a hard tire first after starting the race, because the hard tire isn't a bad tire. It just needs lots of time to get into that window. And with 2 or 3 laps to go, it just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like this is, since we're apparently today is our opposite day, the Schadenfreude. This is this the opposite to when you're watching someone in the lead, but yet to make a pit stop? Where it's like, well, it's gutsy. If you get a pit stop, you're going to somehow win this race, but you're probably not going to get
if you get a safety car or a red flag or anything.
Or safety car.
Brilliant.
It's going to be brilliant.
But yeah.
But if you don't, you're going to drop 8 spaces because everybody's bunched up. Yeah. It's like the exact opposite. You're going to stay in 3rd place and hope for not a safety car because, I thought it was great. I think it might be radio message of the year when they put Verstappen's hard tires on. I watched it like 3 times. They put I can't even quote it now, but they put his tires on and he came on the radio and was just like,
what is his tire?
Wait, what is this tire? What is this tire?
Why are you on the hard?
Because I don't think they can see, right? They can't see what tire it is. It's only white on the outside, or yellow, or red.
It's white, red or yellow on both sides of the tire.
Okay, so they can see that inside edge?
I'm not sure if they can see the inside edge, because the camera angle, the driver view is pretty high over their head. So I'm not sure if from their angle they can actually see enough of the tire.
So is he just feeling it?
That's what I think. I would say that about Verstappen, is that he's definitely capable of getting out on a cold tire and turning the wheel a couple inches once or twice and knowing exactly what he's on.
What he's on. Although, he's just hoping he's wrong. He's like swerving harder and harder. What are we doing here?
Oh no. What is this?
Guys? Hey guys.
Yeah, and it almost seemed heartless, the response from the pit wall. They were just like,
they're like hoping
the only option we had, Max.
Okay, but was it that they just were thinking he wouldn't notice? Like at that point, they were all so embarrassed. They're like, just put him on and see if he doesn't call. And then he called and was like, what are these tires? Like, they're the hard tires.
I don't know. I
thought they told them what they were going on to so they would know Like, because it can be dangerous, right? If they pop a new tire on and don't tell them it's a hard compound versus a medium compound.
Sure. Unless you're going right back out under a safety car and you've got
Yeah, I guess
several
so.
laps of low speed
So
to figure it out or to warm it up as much as you can.
So the only explanation is they were hoping he wouldn't notice. They just put a hard tire on him.
I guess. They were either hoping he wouldn't notice, or they were hoping the safety car would go till lap 65 and he could somehow hold off. I really
Or that
don't
he
know
would be more
how a
diplomatic.
used. We're gonna get into that.
Maybe he'll be cool.
Yeah. No, I don't know. The thing where I think the team made the mistake has to be was there not an old set of mediums or softs that could have lasted 3 laps, 3 hard laps, 3 push laps. Was there not a set? Obviously, tires go through heat cycles and
Sure.
they may be rocks. No matter how much life is left in them, you pull them off. If they get heat back into them, it may just be worse and worse and worse, and it's unsafe to put a set of used tires on. But surely there would be a set from like Qualies or something that they could put on that wasn't a hard. I don't know. There's also rules. There's also rules as to how many sets you get, how many sets
and he was out
each
of
driver
sets.
gets, each team gets.
He burned more softs than everyone else, or 2 sets of softs and a medium. And he had made it all the way through qualifying. So he'd used other sets to get through 3 rounds of qualifying. Because they called that out with Hulkenberg maybe getting fresh tires because he didn't need them in his qualifying.
Yeah.
So he got the benefit of not using as many in qualifying. I'm sure most teams, that does tell you how close these margins are, that teams just assume they will not need more than 3 stops. They if you get through 3 rounds of qualifying, there's an assumption that we will not need any more tires.
The only real scenario where you're stopping that many times, or I'm sorry, more than 3 times,
right,
is when it's raining.
It's rain. Yeah.
If you're switching from inters or full wets back to slicks at some point.
Yeah. I just find that incredible. I still think it's. I mean, he had 2 great radio messages. He had one when he was upshifting. Did you hear that one where he said,
Yeah.
It's again like a clutch.
And then his engineer just came on and said,
1973.
Yeah.
Which
he said 1972 in Monaco. So
he said 72.
Are we going to hear some variation? Is that the benchmark? And like worse than Monaco upshifts is going to be in the 60s?
Yeah.
Better, but not good is going to be something, slightly newer than 1972.
Right. I will say the thing I was most impressed about that entire radio sequence was that his engineer actually had the guts to just reply 1973. Like hopefully we've improved by 1 year. And Max Verstappen's not just going to lose it. And he came back and said something like, 1974 maybe. I think he said 1974. I wrote it down.
Yeah, and for all of you out there who like maybe villainize Max Verstappen, he's got a sense of humor. Okay, he's not just a ruthless dictator from the cockpit who just. I mean, and he could be. He's proven himself. He's earned a little bit of despotism, but he's still out there, chumming it up with his pit wall engineer. So
I think he was cruising strongly in 3rd position at that point. Maybe better.
He was in the pit portal at that point.
He was in the pit portal, just doing magical things, and then whining about his terrible shifts, which again is just chalk that one up to another. Max Verstappen says his 2nd place or 3rd place finishing car is horrible. My shifts are terrible. Are they? Are they that bad?
Right. Poor Max. I'll say it again.
Poor Max.
Poor Max.
Poor guy. He had a great race. Most of his race was great. I'd say almost all of his race was great till he lost his temper there right at the end. But let's talk about some other great races.
He lost more than his temper right there at the end. Poor guy.
He lost a lot. I mean, let's jump into it. So Max had all the good radio messages. He had the what tires are these? 1973. And then the full meltdown. So let's walk through it. Lap 64. Lap 64, everything happened. Leclerc Verstappen, they all got back up to speed again. Verstappen had a huge snap coming onto the main straight.
Very, very sideways. Very, very sideways.
It reminded me of Alonso, I think, in China last year. When he was coming around that main straight, same thing, hit the gravel and just huge snap. It was either Alonso or Sainz.
Yeah, just wild oversteer, corrected, miraculously hung on to it, but obviously, it was on the restart. So
right,
the first car sets the pace,
yeah,
but until you cross that last line, after the safety car goes in, you're not actually back into racing. So you might be sped up, but you can't go alongside or overtake. So the cars can go faster, but there's no overtaking. So Leclerc was essentially just right on his tail.
Yep.
Right. And as soon as they crossed that line, Max had that little snap. Leclerc took advantage coming down the straight. Obviously,
the right side. Yep. Down the straight. Leclerc stated later that as he came down the straight, it was the same pass that Verstappen had done on Leclerc earlier in the race, where Verstappen passed on the right hand side and attempted to veer back over to get off that dirty line where all the marbles were. So Leclerc did the same thing. If you watch from Leclerc's cockpit, it doesn't even look like he's turning. It just looks like he pulled right and there drove straight. But he did veer. He did start to coast over the left a little bit.
Yeah, and it doesn't really matter. I mean, he's fully ahead. I mean, he's already fully alongside. He's half his car is ahead of Max's car. If he wants to take a line, Max has to yield.
Right. And I think that's racing, where guys. Verstappen just didn't yield. I think he was really frustrated. I think that snap, I mean, given Verstappen's excellence, that probably frustrated him right then and there, and he never recovered. But he connects.
The frustration for Max started with, why did you put this hard tire on this car?
On this hard tire? Yeah.
Right.
He hits Leclerc there a little bit. It didn't end up doing any damage, but hits Leclerc there. Leclerc then stays right, and Russell climbs right up beside Verstappen. And honestly, Russell pulls a Verstappen into turn one.
Yeah.
And hits that apex first on the inside.
Absolutely. Is past the mirror of Max on the inside at the apex.
Yep.
The turn's his. The line is his. Yep. Now, Max took the road, took the exit road, took the whatever you want to call that, the relief valve.
And didn't give the spot back. Yeah.
Eventually did, right? Eventually, but didn't want to.
Right.
Well, again, obviously very frustrated. He's perfected. He's about to put the finishing touches on a can't beat the McLarens, but I'm doing as good as I can. Otherwise, and 2 laps to go, he's sitting on hards and he's in the safety cars going back into the pits. So now he's got Leclerc and Russell basically passing him on merit.
Yeah.
They're on better tires. Nothing you can do. So yes, maximum frustration for Max.
And if everything else had been equal, then he has the big crash with Russell. So the engineer comes over the radio, tells Max he's got to let Russell by, give the position back. He loses it. So he's getting increasingly frustrated. They can hear that, right? The moment he complains about the hard tires, from that point on, he just gets increasingly angry.
Yeah.
He smashed into me when Leclerc passed him and had the contact. Why do I have to give it back when Russell passes him? He's shouting at them at that point that, why do I have to do that? And they're basically just like, that's my advice, right? I think that's the point.
At one point, Max said that he wanted Leclerc to give the position back to him.
Right.
For making contact on the way around him.
Right. So just like, I feel like you could just see in a very short period of time, Verstappen goes from wrong tires, Leclerc hit me, Russell passed me, and I shouldn't have to give the spot back. And you can hear the team.
Can you let Russell through, please? Let Russell through. No, I was ahead. My advice is to let through. Wait, just let me off the road. But that's the rules.
They start pretty strong, and then they finally just say, that's our recommendation on giving the spot back, which I think is kind of an indication that your engineering team is like, dude, this is in your hands. If you don't give it back and you get penalized, that's on you. You're clearly in a temper. I can't control you. And that's when he smashed into Russell. If he had not hit Russell, if he had just pulled close, like so Russell, he slows down on the inside and lets Russell go by on the right side. Right?
Yeah.
And then he accelerates back into the turn on the inside of Russell.
I don't know if it was so much an acceleration or a releasing of the brakes, right? So I think what he's doing is he's either holding the brakes a little bit longer through whatever the last turn was,
Yeah.
to give the gap to Russell, but then I think he's like lifting to coast, and he's on more of a straight line than Russell. And I'm not excusing him in any way here.
Well, no,
But we've talked about.
I was just going to correct based off the FIA's statement and why they gave him the 3 points on his license. They said after reviewing his radio messages and the telemetry, car 1 accelerated into the turn to hit car 63.
So does that mean that he applied throttle, or did that mean that
I mean, I guess
had inertia that he was not
You could be right. He
controlling
let
to
the
then-
brake off, but
And I don't know if it's possible to like let the brake off and your car speed up. I don't know if there's enough. You're in a turn and you've got the
you
right
forgot to take
downforce.
cruise control off.
I
don't think they have
I
cruise.
promise. It'll never happen again. No, so okay, so back to this. Okay, so let's say you did hit the throttle. Nonetheless, we've talked about it so many times on here. What is the right move when you're giving the position back? Where do you lose the least amount of ground?
Right.
Was Verstappen planning or trying to anticipate Russell getting around him a lot faster, and he wanted to be right up underneath him to try to compete? I mean, those hard tires were just probably moments away from actually getting into a window. They weren't hard. The hard tires aren't that much grippier than the tire below them or even the soft below them. It's just a matter of getting them in the right window and them going a little bit longer than the other ones.
And I think there's some debate here. He slows down on the left, Russell passes on the right. And then if you look at the overhead, you can see it very clearly that Verstappen's car speeds up again, whether he lets out the brake or accelerates.
And he's on the inside. He took a straight line to the apex of that turn, whereas Russell was coming around. So he just had the advantage to be able to cut a little bit faster into that spot.
Right. But he goes straight into the side of Russell. And I think, to me, at the very least, what you have to chalk this up as is if you ever got really frustrated and you start kind of tossing stuff around a little too aggressively, so you're kind of throwing your bag in the back of the car and then you hit your head on the back of the tailgate. Now you're really frustrated and you start, and then all of a sudden you sort of go through a doorway a little quick and bump into somebody and you realize, okay, I'm going a little quick here. I need to kind of bring it down. Right. That's at the very least, that's what that felt like. Is Verstappen is angry, slamming on the brakes, let Russell by, and now I'm going to swing back in quick behind and just getting sloppy in a way that could be potentially really dangerous.
Yeah, for sure. And look, negligence isn't an excuse. Negligence is culpability here in this case. It's about him not being careful enough. If it wasn't just, hey, I'm mad and I'm going to ram this car that's ahead of me, which I really don't think that was the case. I think it was just sloppy.
Sure.
You're saying, just wound all the way up.
Vendetta
Tempers
after that
flaring.
steward's room way back in Qatar and in Abu Dhabi. We're not digging that up today. Either way.
Either
way, not excusable.
Sure. What the cameras don't lie, the telemetry doesn't lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little red mist, and as the commentators put it, the commentators were pretty shocked as well. It was interesting to hear all the commentators, and then I forget the guy's name. Is it Julian Palmer, who's in the room doing more like tech talk type stuff? They all kind of said that's really surprising to see. Kind of paused. The drivers in the cool down room, Piastri, Norris, and Leclerc, they didn't say anything, and then you could tell they all reacted and wanted to say something, and then just not going to go into it.
Yeah, they know better than to do it on a hot mic.
Yeah.
I'm sure behind closed doors or in some sort of drivers meeting with stewards and that kind of thing, they'll probably point fingers, or it might come up in a few weeks, you know. But yeah, no reason to take a dig without the right context. It's
still coming out. I mean, they're still unpacking everything. Verstappen was hit with a 10-second penalty, which dropped him to 10th. From 5th, I think he finished 5th. Hulkenberg gladly scooped up that 5th place. 6th place? I think he finished sixth and got fifth by the end.
Hulkenberg, apologies.
I think he finished sixth and then got bumped up after Verstappen got his penalty. And then afterward, like I said, the FIA released a statement that they had added 3 points to Verstappen's driver's license or race license or whatever, which basically once you get a certain number of points, you get a race ban. It happened to Magnussen last year. Verstappen is now 1 point away from a race ban. But those points expire after 365 days. And I think some of them expire coming up here at the beginning of the summer. So it may be that he can kind of avoid the ban, but
nonetheless, you are correct. Nico Hulkenberg finished sixth, bumped to fifth. What I had pulled up previously was the driver's standing because I want to touch on this a little bit here. It does seem like McLaren is taking a big step away from the rest of the field.
Yep.
And with a situation like this where Max, instead of getting third, is getting 10th, that is a huge spread in points. I just don't see him coming back by the end of the season.
Right.
I definitely don't see Red Bull doing it as constructors. There's no way. At this point, there's almost no way.
They're going to be
mathematically not impossible,
eventually.
but it's going to be tough. There's too many other good cars in the field. But even though Max has seemed to have good form, it does seem that it's just not going his way. I could be wrong. We could be talking about a really tight race at the end of the year, a tight race for drivers' championships. But to me, one of the takeaways of this week was, okay, another gap is built in between the top and the next.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we believe he's been running that car at the absolute ragged edge and that he is one of, if not the best drivers. And I think probably most people would say he is the best, at least one of the best drivers. If he is the best driver running that car at the ragged edge and the ragged edge is third place, if you don't get a snap after you do a strange strategy, I think you're right. I think it's unlikely. I'm curious to see, and we may have to recap this later in the week when we get a little bit more details when they come out. I do kind of want to review some of the team responses to this. Christian Horner had some comments. Total Wolff had some comments about it. And there's still some debate over whether Verstappen will end up with a ban or something like that. There's some precedents that I think would be worth unpacking. Back when, help me out here, German driver Schumacher had a deliberate attempt to crash into somebody. We need to kind of go into that example. In that case, there was a drivers' championship at stake, and it was a drivers' championship contender. And I've heard this is not the same thing, but if you look at the point spread, the number 3 driver championship, in the drivers' championship, the number 3 driver crashed into the number 4 driver. And they're not that far apart points wise. So I think you're right. McLaren's running away with this. Some of that might mask the impact of doing something like that. No pun intended, but I was disappointed to see it. I mean, that's my big takeaway is great race for Piastri, great race for Hulkenberg, great race for a lot of other drivers. Disappointing to see that from Verstappen. I think most of the time Verstappen is pretty consistent. Love him or hate him. He tends to be pretty fair, and I really don't want to see a repeat of this in the future. Just play fair. You're still likable, even when you're losing with a bad attitude. Just don't crash into people.
Yeah.
That's probably just about it. I mean, there was a ton else we didn't even get into, and maybe we get into here in a little bit. But Racing Bull's still looking great. Hadjar and Lawson had a pretty good day. Yeah. Anything else you had from this race?
I think that's it. I think the defining moments we touched on.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you haven't seen the race, it's worth watching. It's worth watching just to see cool racing. It's a great track, if you ask me. It's not bad. It used to be bad for overtaking before the regs changed, before they took out the final chicane, before you went into the final turn onto the straight. There was, in my mind, it was kind of a track that was aging out, and then the regs changed, and then the cars could pursue more closely to the car in front, things like that. So it's not a narrow track by any means, and it's used for testing, or it has been used for testing many years in a row because it's got high and medium speed corners, long sweeping turns, that do generate a lot of drag on the tires. So you're always forced into this strategy mix-up, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's a race worth watching. But even if all you catch is the race start and some highlights and then the last few laps, yeah, I feel like that's what we've touched on today, and that's kind of what made the race noteworthy.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a lot to get into. And I know we mentioned at the beginning we were hoping to get into some of the rules because I've got questions. And again, maybe one we can get into later this week so we don't run too late here on this or long on this episode. But I'd love to get into some of these rules. Albon getting 10-second penalties for crashing and then just serving it. Is that really a penalty if you're already out of the race? That's another question for another day. The big one I think that everyone's going to be highlighting right now is Russell cuts a corner in Monaco and gets a drive-through penalty. Verstappen hits a driver and gets a 10-second penalty.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have a lot of questions about that, I think. But I think we better call it there to Daniel. Unless you've got any last big reactions for me. Quick reactions. We can call it.
We'll talk about race bans and some more severe penalties next time. That's where my head was at on quick reactions. But for now, it's just a shout out to Bit of Honey.
Yeah.
Thanks for all you do.
People are gonna think we really have them as a sponsor. Oh, Bit of Honey.
Wait, do we not?
Well, if we do,
don't we?
They're not sending us checks yet, but soon they will be. You know what? Actually, Daniel, I'm going to give you a yes or no on this one. You do get one last quick reaction. Should Verstappen have stayed out instead of pitting for the hards?
Yes.
See, I agree. He should have just stayed on those rough. Reds.
It's a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a rock and a hard tire. Sorry, I would have taken the rock.
Rock and a. on that terrible pun. It's time to wrap it up.
I'm sorry.
If you are loving the Critical Lap content, please take a moment to subscribe and like. Throw a comment on there. We love the comments, love the feedback. Tell us what you want to hear next. Thanks, as always, to our legendary pit wall producer, Chris P. We'll hope to talk to you sometime later this week with another episode, getting into maybe some race bans, things like that. And otherwise, we'll also be recapping the Canadian Grand Prix in a couple of weeks' time. So in the meantime, stay up on your F1 news. Check in here for all the details that you need. And we'll catch you next time on the Critical Lap.
Peace.